So in the last video, we finished building out our Discover page. And right now in this video, we want to go ahead and begin working on the Applications page. Before we can do that, I just want to mention that we ran into a problem where this icon, the search icon, wasn't centering properly. So I just came to realize that the reason for that is because this class of -translate is not working. So I'm going to mark it as important in Tailwind using the exclamation mark. And then when you save it, then it's going to recenter properly. So as that is reloading, let us go ahead and jump into the applications page, and then let's begin building this out. So we're going to go into dashboard right here, create a new file called applications/page.jsx, and then we can begin to build this out. So we're going to mark this file as use client, and then we're going to import use state, and then import use query, and then import use user, and then import API, import the button, import the card, and then card content, and card header, and card title. And then we need to import the input, and then we're going to import the select dropdown. So select, and then select content, and select item, and select trigger. And then we're going to import the avatar from components UI avatar, and then avatar fallback. And do we need the avatar image? I hope not. And then we're going to import badge, and not from Lucid React, but from components UI badge. And then we're going to import the loading spinner. It's not a named import, so loading spinner component. And we're going to import the link from next link. And then finally, we're going to import a bunch of icons. So we need the calendar icon from Lucid React. We need the search icon, the filter, the paw print icon, the clock, the check X, user, I, and the message circle icon. And then I forgot one more import, so we need to import the application card component coming from /components/application-card. So let's go ahead and create this so that we don't run into any issues. So inside components right here, create a new file called application-card.jsx, and then let's just say RFC inside here. Change this to application card. We can save that, and then that should now correctly import it. And then we can begin to build out our page. So export default function applications page, not the application card. And then we're going to get the user from use user. We're going to have our search term, so const search term set search term. This is equal to use state. By default, it is going to be an empty string. And then const status filter and set status filter. This is equal to use state. By default, we want to filter by all of them. And then const active tab and set active tab. This is equal to use state. And by default, the active tab is going to be the sent applications. And then next, we need to get our current user. So const current user is equal to use query, pass in api.users.get user by clerk ID. Check for the user question.id. If it exists, then we're going to pass in the clerk ID as user.id. Otherwise, we're going to skip the query. And then const sent applications is equal to use query, pass in api.applications.get applications by applicant, and then current user question_id. If that is true, then we're going to pass in the applicant ID as current user._id. Otherwise, we are going to skip the query. And the next function that we need is received applications. So const received applications is equal to use query, pass in API dot applications dot get applications by owner, and then this checks for the current user question mark dot underscore ID. If that is true, then we're going to pass in the owner ID as current user dot underscore ID. Otherwise, we're going to skip the query. And the next, if there is no current user, then return the loading spinner component, just like that. And then we're going to create a function here to get the icon. So get const get status icon. So just like we did in the pet card. So this one takes in the status, where we're going to say switch and then pass in the status. So we want to check for the case of pending application. And then we're going to return the clock icon with the class name of size-4 and text-yellow-500. Close it out. And then for the case of accepted, we're going to return the check icon with the class name of size-4 and text green-500. Close it out. And then for the case of rejected, we're going to return the X icon with the class name of size-4 and text-red-500. Close it out. And then for the case, not a quotation mark. And then for the case of, sorry, we don't have another case. We have the default case. So for the default case, we're going to return the clock icon. So basically this, let's copy this, paste it here. Now this one is going to have text gray-500. And then we're going to create another function. So const get status color. This one takes in the status, where we're going to have a switch statement here, which takes in the status. So for the case of, let's just do copy and paste. So copy and paste it here. So for the case of pending, you want to go ahead and return the following class names. So bg yellow-500, sorry, -100, and then text yellow-800 and border yellow-200. And then you can copy this. And then for the case of accepted, we can highlight yellow, change this to green, just like that. And then right here, paste it there, highlight this, change this to red. And then right here for the default, paste it in, highlight this, change this to gray. And then next, we're going to create a function to filter applications. So const filter applications is equal to, this takes in the applications as an argument, where we're going to say if there are no applications, then return an empty array. And then let filtered is equal to the applications, which we have as our arguments. And then we're going to say the following: if the status filter is not triple equal to all, sorry, not double equal to all, then we're going to say filtered is equal to filtered.filter. And then for every application that you get back, I'm calling it app, then check for the app.status, which is triple equal to the status filter, just like that. So status filter like that. And then if such term exists, then we're simply going to go ahead and say filtered is equal to filtered.filter. And then for every application that we get back, calling it app, you want to check for the app._id .to lowercase .includes, and then passing the search term .to lowercase, like so. And then below this, we're simply going to say return filter. And that's how we're going to be filtering our applications. Though I do want to mention that this is just a basic filter. And if you want to implement a better filter, then you'd have to implement one which also checks for the name of the pet that is in that application, so that it can return a better filter. But this one will suffice for our needs. And then now we can begin to build out our return. So we're going to return a div here with the class name of mxauto max width dash 6XL, and then padding all around of 4, and then on small screens padding on the X of 6, close it out. And then we're going to return a div here with a class name of margin bottom of 6, and then on each one with a class name of margin bottom of 2, text dash 2XL, font dash bold, and then text gray dash 900, and then on small screens text dash 3XL. This one is going to say applications, and then below the H1 we're going to have a paragraph which is going to say manage your adoption applications. Let's save that. Let's see what we have on the screen. And there we go. So next we're going to go below this div right here, and then we want to build the tabs that we're going to be using to filter out the application, so sent and received. So let's have a comment here that says tabs. We're going to return a div with a class name of margin bottom of 6, and then inside this another div with a class name of flex and flex dash column, and then gap dash 2, and then on small screens flex dash row, and then on small screens gap dash 4. This should say row. And then inside this div we're going to have a button, just the simple HTML button. This button is going to have an on click, so when you click on this we're going to go ahead and say set active tab into sent, and remember that active tab is one of our state values and we have set the default into sent. So do that, and then this is going to have some dynamic class names, so add in your backticks. We're going to have rounded dash large, padding on the X of 4, padding on the Y of 2, font dash medium, and then transition dash colors, and then $ curly bracket. We want to check if the active tab is triple equal to sent. If that is true, then we want to attach the class names of bg orange dash 500 and text dash white, if I can spell correctly, so orange. And then otherwise we're simply going to go ahead and say bg gray dash 100, and then text gray dash 700, and then on hover bg gray dash 200, and then we can close that out. Now inside the button we're going to say applications sent, and then in brackets we want to open this up and then having our dynamic value from convex, so curly brackets sent applications question mark dot length. If they exist, if they don't exist, then return 0, just like that. Now I do know that it is possible to have this as a shadcn button, but I did not want to do that. I just want to show you that if you don't want to use shadcn, then you can use the HTML buttons as well. Now we are simply going to go ahead and copy this, paste it down, change this into received, and then change the active tab here into received, and then the class names are going to remain the same, but now the text here is going to say applications received, and then this is going to say received applications.length, just like that. And then we can save that and we should see our two buttons appear right here. Okay, so these are our two buttons, but they are styled wrongly. Let's go inside the parent here, so flex on small screens flex row. That is not applying for some reason, and it's annoying. Okay, so I don't know why this is not applying the class names correctly, but let's just continue building out our UI. So we're going to go below this button and then below these two divs, and then we're going to go ahead and create our filters. So our filters are going to be as follows. We're going to create the card component with the class name of margin bottom of 6, and then close it out. Then we're going to have card header, and then inside card header we're going to have card title. This is going to have a class name of flex, and then items as center, and text dash 2XL. And then inside the card title we're going to have the filter icon. So filter is going to have a class name of margin on the right of 2, and then size dash 5, and close it out. Below this we're going to say filters, and then below the card header we're going to have card content. Inside card content we're going to have a div with a class name of flex and flex dash column, and then gap of 4, and then on small screens we're going to say flex dash row. I hope this one works because the top one is not working. And then we're going to have another div with the class name of flex dash 1, and then inside this another div with the class name of relative, and then inside this we're going to have the search icon. So search, and you know what, we have already built this search icon somewhere, so it should be on the discover page. Let's just go ahead and copy it because it's going to be faster. So copy, and then just paste it here. So search icon, the class name should remain the same. And then now the placeholder for the input here is going to say search applications dot dot dot. The value here is the search term because that is also the state value that I've given for this page. And then set search term and then class name padding on the left of 10. So that's okay. And then below these two divs, we're going to have another div with the class name of small screens with -48. And then inside this, we're going to have the select. And the select is going to have a value here of status filter. And then on value change, we're going to call set status filter just like that. And then inside this, we're going to have the select trigger. This is going to have a class name of width-full. And then this is going to say the status. And then finally below this, we're going to have the select content. We're going to have select item inside here. The value here for the first one is going to be all. And then it's going to say all statuses. Well, it doesn't really matter. Let us copy this down three more times. This is going to say pending. This is going to say accepted. And this is going to say rejected. The text here is going to say rejected. This one is going to say accepted. This one is going to say pending. And I think we should be able to save that. And let's see what we have on the screen. Okay, so we have our input here, so you can type inside it to filter out our applications. And then we have our drop down right here, so you can filter using pending applications, accepted applications, and rejected applications. Now, I do realize that right here also the flex row is not working. So flex column, then flex row. Am I doing it wrongly? Why is it not working? If I change this into flex row, does that change anything? So flex row. Flex column by default. And then when you get to small screens and above, is this not working? It is. If I make this important, will it work? So even that does not work. What is happening with this thing? Let's remove that flex row. Oops. Pressed page up. Where is it? Where's flex? Oh, I'm in the wrong file. Come on. So right here, let's go and change this to flex row. And then let's have it as this. And I think I'm going to do the same thing on the top. So right here, we'll remove this, change this into flex row, and then let's add flex wrap. Then let's see, flex wrap. That should be okay, so that when it reaches the end of that, then it's going to apply. But wait a minute, the class name of small gap 4 is applying. That's annoying. That's very annoying. Let's just save it. Let's continue building out application. This is how I wanted it to look like on large screens, but it was not looking like that. So let's just continue building this out. I hope I get to figure out the issue with the CSS right there. So now we're going to go below this card, and then we're going to create our applications list. So for our applications list, we're going to return a div here, the class name of space on the y of 4. And then we're going to check if the active tab is equal to the sent tab. If that is true, then we're going to do something. And then if it is false, we're going to do something else. So first of all, we're going to return, sorry, this should not be a fragment. So we want to go ahead and check filter applications, which we have right here, this function. And remember that it takes in the applications. So in this case, we want to filter applications and then pass in the sent applications. So if that dot length is greater than 0, if that is true, then you want to do something. And in this case, we want to go ahead and let's break this up a bit. So we want to say filter applications, this one once again, then pass in sent applications, and then dot map. And then for every application that we get back, then we're going to go ahead and return an application card component, which we created. This is going to have a key of application ._id, and then the application prop is going to be equal to the application object that we get back when you map over it. And then the type of application is going to be sent, and then get status icon is going to be equal to an inline function here where we're going to say get status icon and then pass in the application dot status, and then get status color is once again going to be equal to an inline function get status color and then pass in the application dot status like so. And then for our else statement, which I have forgotten where it's supposed to be, so it should be this one, but we have two of them, so we are missing one more. I think missing one more. There we go. So right here we're going to go ahead and return the card. This card is going to have a class name of padding on the Y of 12 and then text dash center, and then inside the card we're going to have card content. Inside card content we're going to have the paw print icon, so paw print icon. This is going to have a class name of mx auto and then margin bottom of 4 size dash 12 and then text gray dash 400. This should be size dash 12. And then below the paw print we're going to have an h3 with a class name of margin bottom of 2, text dash large and font dash semi bold, and then text gray dash 900. And then this is going to say no applications yet. And then below the h3 we're going to have a paragraph with a class name of margin bottom of 4. The paragraph here is going to say start browsing pets and submit your first adoption application. Full stop. And then below the paragraph we're going to have a link which is going to be linking into href/dashboard/discover, just like that. And then inside this we're going to have a button, and the button is going to say browse pets, just like that. And then now we're going to go inside this statement right here. Now we want to check for filter applications and then pass in received applications now. And you know what, I think it's probably easier if we copy it. So let's see, where do we copy it starting from? So we should copy it starting from here. So filter applications dot length, and then copy the entire thing up to here. So copy and then paste it here. Now this one should not say sent application, so just Control D to highlight both of them and change this into received applications like so. So dot length, and then this can remain to be the same. We are returning the application card component. And then now the type here is going to say received instead of sent, so received. And then for the h3 here we're going to say no applications received yet. And then the text is going to be slightly different as well. So when someone applies to adopt your pets, they will appear here, and that should be okay. Now we can save that, and we should be able to see right on this tab, because we already made an application here, we should see application card right there. So we are able to see this because when I was demoing something before in a previous video, we made an application. So that's why we can see this here. If you are not able to see it, then simply go ahead and create a new application for a pet and you'll be able to see it. And then let's begin to build out the application card component. So the application card takes in a couple of props. So it takes in the application and then the type, and then get status icon and get status color like so. And then inside here we're simply going to go ahead and return the card component. Now let's enter to auto import it. Inside the card right here we're going to have the card content. This is going to have a class name of padding all round of 6, close it out. And then we're going to have a div here with a class name of flex and flex dash column and justify dash between, and then gap of 4. And then on small screens we're going to say flex dash row, and then on small screens we're going to say items dash sent, just like that. And then inside this we're going to have another div with a class name of flex1, and then another div with a class name of margin bottom of 3, flex items dash center, and then gap of 3 like so. And then we're going to show the avatar component from ./UI avatar, which means we are not using it inside here. We're not even using these ones inside here, so I can remove these two. That should be okay. Now the avatar here is not self-closing, but it's going to have a class name of size-10, and then inside the avatar we're going to have the avatar fallback, just like that. The avatar fallback is going to be showing the user icon, which you can control spacebar, enter to auto import it from Lucid React. It is going to have a class name of size-5, and then below the avatar we're going to turn a div, and then inside this div we're going to turn an h3 with a class name of text-large and font-semi-bold. Inside the h3 we want to check whether the type of the application is triple equal to sent. If that is true, then the text is going to say your application. Otherwise, then we're going to say application received. And then below the h3 we're going to have a paragraph with a class name of text-sm, and then inside here we want to check once again if the type is triple equal to sent. If that is true, then the text is going to say pet adoption application, and then otherwise we're simply going to say someone wants to adopt the pet, just like that. Now we can save that. Let's see what we have on the screen. And right here it says card content is not defined. That's because right here, control spacebar, enter to auto import it, save it, and then it's going to reload. Okay, so once again I noticed that the class names for Flex are not applying. So right here they are not applying at all. So let's remove them. Let's change this into items.center, and then that should now apply the classes correctly as I expect them. Okay, and then now we're going to go below this paragraph, and then below two divs we're going to create another div here with the class name of margin bottom of 3, flex and flex-wrap, and items.center, gap-4, and then text-sm. Inside this div we're going to have another div with a class name of flex and items.center, and then gap-1, and then we're going to show the calendar icon, enter to auto import it. This is going to have a class name of size-4, close it out, and then below this we're going to have a span, which is going to be showing the new date, and then pass in the application dot created at. It's going to show me the drop down. Okay, so created at dot to locale date string, like so. And then we're going to go below this span, and then below this div we're going to create another div with a class name of flex and items.center and gap-2, and then we're going to say get status icon, and then pass in the application.status, just like that. Below this we're going to show the badge from ./UI badge. This badge is going to have a class name of get status color, and then pass in the application.status, and then this should not be self-closing. And then inside this we're going to say application.status, just like that. And then you can go below these two divs, and we're going to have a paragraph here with a class name of margin bottom of 4 and text-sm and text grade-700. And then inside here we're going to have the strong component, sorry, the strong element, which is going to say reason in full colon. And then below this we're going to go ahead and say application dot reason dot substring, and get the first 100 characters, so 0 up to 100. And then below this we want to check for the application data dot reason dot length is greater than 100, and only when that is true, that's when we want to return the ellipsis, just like that. Fantastic. Now once again, I do know that there are other ways that you can do this, but this is the way that I did it in the application. Now we're going to go below this paragraph, and then below this div we're going to have another div with a class name of flex and flex-column, and then gap of 2. And you know what, flex row doesn't seem to work, so let's just have flex row and then gap of 2. And then inside here we're going to have the link component, which I should import from next link. This is going to go into a dynamic href of /dashboard /applications / and then $, application dot underscore ID. So we need to build that page, and then inside this we're going to be showing the button component with the variant of outline, which I need to import. So Control Spacebar, enter to auto import it, and then the size here is going to be small, and then the class name we're going to say width dash full, and then on small screens width dash auto, close it out, and then inside the button we're going to show the eye icon with the class name here of margin right of 2 and size dash 4, margin right 2, size dash 4, close it out, and then the text is going to say view details, just like that. And then below the link we want to check for the application status if it is equal to accepted. So accepted, and only when that is true, that's when we want to go ahead and render out this other link, which you can just copy and paste it here. Now this one is going to be going into the dashboard, and then it's going to go into messages. So messages, then question mark application, and set it equal into $ curly bracket application dot underscore ID, just like that. The button size is going to be small, but the variant is going to be default, so you can remove the variant altogether, or you can just set it to default. It is still going to apply the same button. And then the icon here is going to say message circle, just like the circle. Enter to auto import it, and then the text is going to say message owner, so something like that, message owner. But not, let me just say message, and I think we should now be able to save that, and we should see something on the screen. And there we go. So you can see that one application has been received, and if I go ahead and make an application, so browse pets, so I'm going to go ahead and make an application to him. Okay, so start adoption process, and let's fill this out very quickly. Let's grab some random text. So let's just copy this, paste it here, paste it here, paste it here, and then submit application. So application submitted, and you can see it says pending review. And then now I can go into applications, and in the application center you can see that I've now made a new application. If I click on view details, it is going to take us into this other page, which we have not yet created for the dynamic page. So let's go ahead and do it right away. So for the dynamic page, we are simply going to go into applications right here. We're going to create a new file called $, but square brackets ID, and then /page.jsx, which is going to create the application dynamic page of ID right there. And then we can begin to build it out. So we're going to mark this file as use client. We're going to import use state, and I'm moving a bit faster because this is something that we've done before. So import use query, and then import use mutation, and then import use user, and then import API. That's the wrong one. And then we need to import use params, so import use params, then use router as well, move it upwards. And then we need to import the button component. We need to import the card, so card, and then card content, and then card description, then card header, and then card title. We need to import the badge. We need to import the separator. Which one is it? Right here. And then we need to import the avatar fallback, and the avatar image. And then we need to import the link component. We need to import the post method from Sonar. And then we need to import our icons. So import the arrow left, import the check, the X, the user, mail, phone, map pin, and calendar, and then the message circle. There we go. And then we can begin to build it out. So export default function application details page, and we can destructure the ID from params. So use params, and then const router is equal to use router. then const user is equal to use user, const is updating, set is updating, this is equal to use state. By default it is false, and then we need to get the current user, so const current user is checking for use query, and then pass in api.users.get user by clerk ID. This checks for the user question mark dot ID. If it exists, then we're going to pass in the clerk ID as user.id, otherwise we're going to skip the query. And then const application is equal to use query, and then pass in api.applications.get application by ID, which we don't have, but then we're going to pass in the ID as the ID from use params. And then const pet is equal to use query, and then we're going to pass in api.pets.get pet by ID. This checks for the application question mark dot pet ID, and application is right on top, which I've not yet got pet ID. So if that is true, then we're going to pass in the ID as application.pet ID, otherwise we're going to skip the query. And then const applicant is equal to use query, and then we're going to pass in api.users.get user by ID. This checks for the application question mark dot applicant ID. If that is true, then we're going to pass in the ID as application.applicant ID, otherwise we're going to skip the query. And then const update application status is equal to use mutation, where we're going to pass in api.applications.update application status. Once again, we don't have this function, so we're going to create it. And then const create notification, this is equal to use mutation, and then pass in api.notifications.create notification, which we have. And then we can create our functions here. So const handle status update, this is going to be an asynchronous function taking the taking the status, and then we're going to check if there is no application, or there is no applicant, or if there is no pet, or if there is no current user, then we're simply going to go ahead and say return. Otherwise we're going to say set is updating to true, and then we're going to have our try catch block right here. So for the try, we're going to say await update application status. Once again, we don't have this function, but this takes in the ID as application._ID, and then the status, just like that. And then once we have that, then we want to create notification for the applicant. So create notification for applicant. We're going to say await create notification. Open this up. This takes in the user ID as application.applicant ID, and then the type of notification is application_update, because it is an update to the application. The title is going to be a dynamic value taking the application $curly status, so application status, so application rejected, accepted, or pending. And then the message is going to be a dynamic value as well. Your application for $curly pet.name has been $curly status, so accepted or rejected, and that's okay. And something that I tried to do but failed is to send an email to the applicant. I tried, but I failed to do that, so I'm not going to do it here. But once you have that, then we're going to say toast.success, and we're going to say a dynamic value application, and then $curly status successfully, and then router.push, and push them back into the dashboard /profile page, like so. For our catch, we're going to say console.error, and we're going to say error updating application, then pass in the error, and then toast.error failed to update application. And then for our finally block, we're we are going to say set is updating back to false. Fantastic. Now we're going to go below this. We want to check if there is no application, or if there is no pet, or if there is no applicant, or if there is no current user. If that is true, then we're going to return our loading spinner component just like that. This should say application. And then finally, we want to check if you are the owner. So const is owner is equal to application dot owner ID is triple equal to the current user dot underscore ID, like so. And then we can begin to build out our return. So for our return, we're going to return a div with a class name of mxAuto, and then max width dash 4xl, and then padding all around of 6. And let's make this 6xl because I think that's what we used in the other pages as well. And then we're going to have a div with a class name of margin bottom of 8. Inside this div, we're going to have the button with a variant of ghost. And then when you click on this button, we're going to call an inline function here, router.push. Sorry, not router.push, but router.back. And then the class name is going to say margin bottom of 4. Close it out. Inside the button, we're going to show the arrow left icon with a class name of margin on the right of 2, and then size dash 4. Close it out. The text is going to say back. And below the button, we're going to have another div with a class name of flex and items dash center, and then justify dash between. Inside this, we're going to have another div, and then on each one, the class name of margin bottom of 2, text dash 3xl, and font dash bold, and text gray dash 900. And then the text is going to say adoption application. Below the H1, we're going to have a paragraph which says application for, and then pet.name, just like that. And then we're going to go below this div. We're going to have a badge. So this badge is going to have a class name, which is a dynamic value here, and it is a bit convoluted, but very simple. Let's first of all render the text for the badge. The text is going to say application.status. Now for the class names, we want to check if the application.status is triple equal to pending. If that is true, then we want to apply bg yellow dash 100 and text yellow dash 800. And otherwise, we want to check if the application.status is triple equal to accepted. And if that is true, then we want to show bg green dash 100 and text green dash 800. And if it is not, then by default we want to show bg red dash 100 and text dash red dash 800, just like so. Now we can save that, but our application is going to break because we don't have some functions here from convex. So we have the current user, but we don't have the application and I think the applicant, and the update application status as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So inside convex, we have the applications right here. So this is the file that we're going to be working in now. So let's start by get application by ID. So right below create application, we're going to go below this. Export const get application. Let me just type it out, not type it really, but copy it. So get application by ID. This is going to be equal to a query. Open this up. It takes in the arguments here of ID coming from b.id from the adoption applications table. And then the handler here is an asynchronous function taking the context and the arguments. So I simply can say return await context.db.get passing arguments.id, like so. And that's how you get an application by its ID. And then the next one that we need is the applicant. So get user by ID. No, we already have this one. We already have that one. We need the update application status. So you're going to go below the function. Where's the function to get application by owner? So right here, we're going to say export const. I mean, it doesn't matter the order in which you create the functions, but the reason why I'm doing it this way is because it's kind of like hierarchical. So export const update application status. This is a mutation, and this takes in some arguments here. So it takes in the ID as v.id from the adoption applications table, and then it also takes in the status as v.string. And then for our handler function, this is asynchronous, taking the context and the arguments, where we're going to say return await context.db.patch, and then passing the arguments.id, and you want to patch in the status as arguments.status, and then we also want to add in the updated at as date.now, just like that. And I think, is it only those two functions we need? So applicant is getUser by ID, api.users.getUser by ID, okay? And then update application, create notification. Create notification, we already have it, right? We already have notifications, create notification. Yes. So I think that should be okay. Now we can jump back into this file. Actually, if we save it, then we should be able to see something on the screen. So you have an issue here that says adoption. I've misspelled that. I've misspelled it. So applications, adoption here. So adoption application, that's okay. Let's reload it. So I reloaded it, but it's still giving me the same error. So let's shut down Convex, shut it down, and then let's just restart it. Hopefully that is going to fix it. And as it is reloading, let's just continue building out our UI. So our UI is somewhere here. So we're going to go below this badge and then below two divs, and we're going to return another div with the class name of grid and grid-columns-1, and then gap of 8, and then on large screens grid-columns-3. And then the first div that we want to build here, because it's a grid, is the application details. So we're simply going to go ahead and return another div with a class name of space on the y of 6, and then on large screens column-span-2. And then inside here, we're going to render out the card. And then inside the card, we're going to have the card header, then card title, which is going to say pet information. And then below the card header, we're going to have the card content. And then inside card content, we're going to have a div with the class name of flex, items as center, and space on the x of 4. And then inside this, we're going to have another div with the class name of flex and size-16, and then items-center and justify-center and rounded-large and pg gray-100. And then inside this, we're going to show the user icon. This is going to have a class name of size-8 and then text gray-400. Close it out. And then below this div, we're going to have another div. Inside this div, we're going to return an h3 with the class name of text-large and font-semi-bold. The text is going to say pet.name. And then below the paragraph, below the header, we're going to have a paragraph here. This paragraph is going to say pet.breed, and then ampersand mid dot, and then semicolon, and then pet.type, like so. And then we're going to go below this paragraph. We're going to have another paragraph with the class name of text-sm and text gray-500. Inside this paragraph, we're going to say pet.age, years old, and then ampersand mid dot, and then we're going to say pet, pet dot location, just like that. And then we're going to go below this card. We're going to create another card which is going to say the application data. So we can have a comment here, application data. So create a card, and then card header, and then card title like so, application details. Below the card header, we're going to have card content, which is going to have a class name of space on the y of 4. Close it out. Inside the card content, we're going to have a div. This div is going to have an h4, the class name of margin bottom of 2, font-medium, and text gray-900. And then the text is going to say experience with pets. Below the h4, we're going to have a paragraph with the class name of text gray-700 and capitalize. And then inside the paragraph, we're going to show application data dot experience, just like that. And then we're going to go below the paragraph, and then below the div, we're going to have the separator component, like so. And then below the separator, we're going to have another div, which we can simply copy this. It's faster, so copy and paste. This one is going to say living space, so living space. And then right here, we're going to say living space, just like that. And then once again, below this, have a separator. And then we're going to paste in the div one more time. This one is now going to say work schedule. And then this is going to say work schedule, like so. Have another separator, and then paste in that div again. This one is now going to say other pets. This is going to say other pets. Have another separator, and then paste in that div again. This is now going to say reason for adoption, so reason for adoption. And then this one is going to say reason. And then now below this div, we want to check for application data dot references if they exist, because references is optional. If they exist, then we're going to return a React fragment first of all, and then return the separator, like so. And you might be wondering why I'm returning a fragment. It's because the fragment is kind of like an inline component. So if I return a div, it's going to return a block component, and I don't want that. So below this, now we can now paste in that div that we've been copying. This one is now going to say references, and then right here, references, like so. And then probably this should not be capitalized, by the way. I've just noticed, I've just been copying and pasting. This one should probably also not be capitalized because it's a reason. It should be text, easily readable. And I think the rest of it is okay. Now we can go below this closing parentheses, and let's copy this actually because it's faster. Paste it in. This one is now checking for additional information, so additional info, like so. The text here is going to say additional information, and then here we want to check for additional info, like so. And I think that should be okay. Let's save that. That should be the first part built. And still giving me this issue. And there we go. So it hadn't reloaded on my side, but you can see that this right here is what we've been building. These are all the separators, and I've misspelled this right here. Remove that one L, and everything else should be okay. So now the second part that we want to build is the sidebar that is going to be appearing here. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go below the card, and then below this div, we're going to go ahead and create a div with the class name of space on the y of 6. And then now we're going to have the card component again. Now this part is the applicant information. So applicant information, because the first one was the pet information. So we're going to have card, and then card header, and then card title, applicant information. And then below card header, we're going to have card content with the class name equal to space on the y of 4, close it out. And then we're going to have a div with the class name of flex and the items as center, and then space on the x of 3. And then here we're going to have the avatar component. This is going to have a class name of size 12. And then we're going to go ahead and show the avatar image with the source of applicant.profile image, close it out. And then avatar fallback. The avatar fallback is going to be showing the user icon with the class name of size-6, close it out. And you know what, let me have a class name on the avatar image here of object-cover so that the image takes up the full width properly. And then below the avatar, we're going to have a div. This div is going to have a paragraph with the class name of font medium, which is going to say applicant.name. And then below this, copy this down. This is going to say applicant.location. and it's going to say text-sm for the class name, just like that. And then below two divs, we want to check if applicant.bio, and only when it is true, because bio is optional, that's when we want to render a paragraph with the class name of text-sm and text grade-700, and then the text is going to say applicant.bio. So, and then below this, we're going to return a div with the class name of space on the y of 2, and then another div with the class name of flex and items center, and then space on the x of 2, and then text-sm, and then inside here we're going to return the mail icon with the class name of size-4, and then the span here is going to say the applicant.email, and then below this div we want to check if the applicant.phone is true. So if they added their phone number, then we are simply going to copy this, paste it here, change this into phone, and then this applicant.phone, like so. And then once again, we can go ahead and let's copy this. Actually, it's going to be faster. Paste it here, highlight this, Control D, Control D, change this into location. But now the icon here is called map pin, and then the rest of it remains the same. And then now we can go below this div. We're going to have a link with an href going into a dynamic value. So /dashboard /users /the applicant ._id. So the profile of the applicant. And then here we're going to have the button component. So button variant is going to say outline, class name is going to say width-full, and then this is going to say view full profile, just like that. And then below the card, we are now going to show the application status. So once again, a card component, and then card header. So let me see if I can do this in MS. So card header, and then go into card title. Okay, so it works. And then this is going to say application status. And then below the card header, we're going to have card content. So card content is going to have a class name or space on the y of 4. And then inside card content, we're going to have a div with the class name of flex, items as center, and space on the x of 2. Inside this, we're going to have the calendar icon, calendar, with the class name of, am I missing something? The div and then the calendar. Okay, that's okay. So size-4, and then text gray-500 closed out. The span here is going to say, first of all, it's going to have some class names, text-sm and text gray-600. And then the span is going to say applied on, and then pass in new date, and then pass in application.created at .to local date string. It's not giving me the drop down. Fantastic. Now we're going to go below this div. We want to check if is owner is true. So if you're the owner and the application dot status is equal to pending. So if both of those are true, then we're going to return a div with a class name of space on the y of 3, close it out. And then inside this div, we're going to have a button. So this button, when you click on this button, we're going to be calling an inline function here called handle status update, and then pass in accepted. And then the disabled state for this button is going to be dependent on the is updating state value. And then the class name here is going to say width-full, bg green-500, and then on hover, bg green-600, just like that, close it out. And then we're going to show the check icon with the class name here of margin on the right of 2 and size-4, close it out. And then the text is going to say accept application. Now we're going to copy this button, paste it below. Now this is going to say rejected. So accept or reject the application. Now instead of the green, this is actually, we can remove the class names here because we can use a variant. So now this button is going to have a variant of destructive. And let's see, this one should have a class name of width-full. Does this one have a class name of width-full? Okay, it does right here. And then now, instead of now accept application, we are simply going to go ahead and say reject application, like so. And let's save that. Actually, we have written quite a bit. Let's save it and then let it reload. So you have an issue here that says new data is not defined, so it should say new date. That's why it was not giving me the drop down. So as that is reloading, let's build the final thing. So we're going to go below this. We want to check for the application dot status if it is triple equal to accepted, and only when it is true, that's when we want to have a link here with an href going into a dynamic value. So going into /dashboard /messages question mark application equal to, and then $ curly bracket application dot underscore id, and then inside the link we're going to have a button with a class name of width-4, and then inside the button, close it out. Inside the button we're going to show the message circle icon with the class name of margin right of 2, and then size -4, and then close it out. And then the text is going to say start conversation. So once they accept it, then you're going to see this button that says start conversation. Save it, and there we go. Look at that, looking very, very nice. Now obviously I did this off screen where I went ahead to add in some kind of data here, and the color of this text is wrong. So where do we have the email? So I think this is the div. So if I say text gray-600, that should apply to all three of them. And there we go, much better. Very, very nice. And let's see. So the application status here is saying pending, but let me see, which profile is this? Which profile is this? Your application is right here. Okay, so I need to accept the application from the other side so that we can see the button on the bottom up here, this button right here. But that's okay. You should be able to test it out. What is this error? It says class. Let me spell that right here. Remove the triple S, and that should be okay. So now we have built the home page, the discover page, the applications page, as well as the dynamic applications page. So now in the next video, we're going to build the notifications page, and then finally we're going to end with the messages page. So I want to start with the notifications page because it is a much easier page. So let's go ahead and do that next.